Familiar stranger. It began as nothing more than a detail, the kind of background element your brain registers but doesn't consciously linger on. Something you'd notice in passing the way you notice a lamppost, or a parked car, or the steady hum of a streetlight at night. At least, that's what Adam had told himself during those first few weeks, when she was just a silhouette across the street, a figure that belonged to the scenery of his nightly walk home. The walk itself was routine, 7 blocks from the bus stop to his apartment building, through a neighborhood that straddled the line between quiet and unnervingly deserted. During the day it was unremarkable, people walking their dogs, kids pedaling scooters along cracked sidewalks, delivery vans idling with hazard lights blinking. But at night, it transformed. The shops closed early, leaving only their dusty windows and metal shutters behind. Street lamps buzzed with the fatigue of old wiring, casting pale yellow pools of light onto stretches of broken pavement. The air itself felt thinner, sharper, the kind of air that carried sound too well, so that footsteps seemed louder than they should be, and the rustle of leaves behind a fence made your chest tighten before logic caught up. It was in that atmosphere that he first noticed her, always on the opposite side of the street. Always wearing the same long coat, dark enough to blur her shape, but not so dark that it erased her from the faint glow of the lamps. And always with that red scarf looped around her neck, a streak of color almost violent against the monochrome gloom. The first time he saw her, Adam had been balancing his bag on his shoulder, half reading a text on his phone. A flash of red in the corner of his eye drew his attention. She was walking parallel to him, maybe 20 feet away, separated by the empty street between them. He thought nothing of it. People walked home late all the time. But then it happened again. The next night, and the one after that. 4 weeks. He'd leave the bus stop at 11:15, take the same turn onto Grayston Avenue, and there she'd be. Same distance, same pace. Sometimes she was slightly ahead of him, sometimes a step behind. She never looked over, never seemed to notice him at all. Her head was usually lowered, her step steady, her posture rigid in a way that reminded him of someone balancing a book on their head. It unsettled him, though he wouldn't admit it. He joked about it once to a co-worker. "Guess I got a twin night owl, huh? We're both slaves to public transport." His co-worker laughed and told him to ask for her number, but Adam never entertained the thought. There was something about her presence that wasn't inviting. Not unfriendly, exactly, just untouchable. And then there was the scarf. That red scarf was impossible not to notice. It was wrapped too tightly around her neck, coiled high like a turtleneck, as though she was shielding herself from a winter that hadn't come yet. September nights in the city were cool, but not scarf weather. Not like that. He kept telling himself he was overthinking. That people had quirks. Maybe it was sentimental, a gift from someone she loved. Maybe she was just cold-blooded. Maybe she had a scar she didn't want to show. Explanations were easy to come by, but none of them eased the way his stomach twisted when his eyes inevitably found her scarf again. One Thursday night, about 3 weeks into this routine, the bus was late. Adam didn't get off until nearly midnight, and the street was even more deserted than usual. He tightened his jacket and quickened his pace, half expecting to see the woman across the road, as he always did. But she wasn't there. He felt relief first, then disappointment at that relief. He laughed at himself under his breath. "You're getting spooked by some stranger in a scarf," he muttered. "Jesus." The quiet pressing around him, making the click of his shoes on the concrete sound hollow, like he was walking through a vast, empty chamber. He was halfway down Grayston when a sudden shuffle of movement caught his attention. He looked up. She was there. Not across the street this time. Ahead of him, on his side of the sidewalk. The street lamp behind her buzzed and flickered, throwing her shape into jerky frames, like a stop-motion figure. Her coat hung lower than he remembered, almost brushing her ankles. The scarf was wound high as ever, though the end of it fluttered slightly in the breeze, a slash of crimson against the night. Adam slowed instinctively. His first thought was irrational. She's not supposed to be here. He almost laughed at the phrasing, but it clung to him, sticky and undeniable. She had broken the pattern, and patterns, when they broke, meant something. He tried to brush it off. People change their walking routes. It's not weird. He'd just walked past her. Maybe she wouldn't even look up. Maybe she'd cross to the other side before they had to acknowledge each other. But she didn't. As he approached, her pace adjusted, not in an obvious way, but enough that they drew level with one another under the glow of the next lamp. He glanced sideways, pretending it was casual, but the sight jolted him. Her face was pale. Not sickly pale, but drained of depth, like the skin of someone seen through frosted glass. Her features were ordinary, unremarkable, except for the way her lips were pressed into a line too thin, too sharp. And her eyes, they didn't meet his. They didn't look at anything at all. They stared ahead, fixed on some invisible point. He walked faster, his heartbeat quickening. The air felt heavier, harder to swallow. The faint perfume of dust and exhaust that usually hung over Grayston was overwhelmed by something else, a faint metallic tang, almost like rust. She kept pace with him. Step for step, he turned a corner earlier than usual, ducking into Larchmont Street. It was narrower, with fewer lamps. The shadows were thicker, but at least he'd shaken her, he thought. Except he hadn't. The sharp rhythm of her heels clicked against the pavement behind him. Closer now. Adam's throat went dry. He resisted the urge to run. Running felt dangerous, like acknowledging something that until now had been easy to dismiss. He reached his apartment building and hurried inside, not daring to look behind him. By the time he made it to his third-floor unit and shut the door, his shirt clung with sweat. He leaned against the wood, listening to his own ragged breathing. Silence. He almost convinced himself he'd imagined it, that exhaustion and paranoia had fed each other into a trick of the senses. Then, faintly, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps, not a voice. A soft, dragging scrape against the hallway outside his door, as though something sharp was being trailed along the wall. He froze, staring at the gap beneath the door. A shadow passed, slow, lingering. Then it was gone. Adam didn't sleep that night. And when he stepped off the bus the next evening, the street felt emptier than ever, each pool of lamplight surrounded by oceans of dark. He almost hoped she wouldn't be there, almost prayed. But halfway down Grayston, he saw her again. And this time, the scarf had slipped just slightly, enough to reveal the faintest glimpse of skin beneath it, skin that looked wrong, bruised, torn, as though the scarf wasn't keeping her warm, as though it was holding her together. The silent companion. The second night was worse because Adam couldn't pretend it had been his imagination anymore. That glimpse beneath the scarf had been too vivid, too wrong to dismiss as a trick of shadows. The skin at her throat hadn't looked like skin at all. It had looked mangled, torn, discolored in a way flesh didn't survive. He told himself he'd only seen a shadow, that maybe her scarf was patterned with something that had caught the lamplight. But the thought rang hollow in his mind. He'd spent most of Friday pacing his apartment, staring out the blinds onto the street below as if expecting her to appear in daylight. Of course, she didn't. The street during the day was ordinary. Kids chasing each other, an old man dragging his trash bin, a dog barking at nothing. But nightfall arrived with an unease that tightened every nerve in his body. Still, life didn't stop because of paranoia. He had to work. He had to get home. And so, like every other night, he found himself stepping off the bus at Grayston Avenue. The air smelled faintly of rain. Puddles glittered in the broken asphalt, catching the reflections of the lamps. The world felt damp, muted, as though wrapped in cotton. Adam shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets and kept his eyes forward. She wasn't there. Relief coursed through him, almost dizzying. His muscles loosened, his jaw unclenched. He thought, maybe that was it. Maybe last night had been the last of it, a strange coincidence with a stranger who just happened to walk his route for a few weeks before moving on with her life. He made it 2 blocks before the sound of footsteps joined his own. At first, he thought it was an echo. The puddle's distorted sound made it carry differently, but then he noticed the rhythm wasn't quite the same as his. A fraction behind. Deliberate. Distinct. His heart sank as he turned his head. She was there. Closer than before, no longer across the street. She was on the same sidewalk, just a handful of yards behind him, her coat brushing her ankles, her scarf blazing red even in the pale light. Adam swallowed hard. His mouth tasted of metal, his stomach knotted. He forced himself to keep walking. Fast, but not frantic. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing he was afraid. The footsteps behind him quickened. He turned onto Larchman again, hoping the narrower street might put distance between them. But she followed. He could hear her breathing now, soft, steady, unnervingly calm. The urge to confront her swelled, warring with terror. Enough was enough. He spun around under the dim glow of a street lamp. She stopped dead. For the first time, her eyes lifted. They were gray, flat gray, as if color had been drained from them long ago. They fixed on him with an emptiness that rooted him to the spot. Her face was expressionless, but her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to speak. But no words came. Only silence stretched between them, heavy as a shroud. Adam's voice cracked when he finally forced sound past his throat. "Why are you following me?" No answer. She simply stood there, scarf drawn tight, head tilted just slightly to one side. He tried again, louder this time. "Do you live around here? What do you want?" Nothing. The silence gnawed at him more than words could have. He felt foolish, like he was yelling at a statue. Yet when he turned to walk away, the footsteps resumed immediately behind him, as if his permission had been given. By the time he reached his building, panic had eroded all reason. He bolted inside, heart hammering, and shoved the door closed behind him. His hands shook as he fumbled the locks into place. He pressed his forehead against the wood, straining to hear through the thickness. The footsteps slowed, stopped. Then, impossibly, they began again, inside. He spun around, but the hallway was empty. No sound, no figure. Just the hum of the refrigerator in his kitchen, the faint creak of the pipes above. Adam backed into his living room and dropped onto the couch, sweat cooling against his skin. He told himself he was losing it, that he hadn't heard what he thought he heard. But when he finally dozed off hours later, dreams dragged him into corridors that stretched forever, lit only by broken lamps, with a red scarf trailing around every corner he turned. The next few nights were a blur of mounting dread. She was always there now, no longer across the street, no longer keeping her distance. She walked beside him, sometimes just behind, sometimes perfectly aligned, as though they were companions leaving the bus together after a long day. She never spoke. She never touched him, but her presence devoured the air around him, bending it, thickening it until every breath was a struggle. He tried ignoring her. He tried darting across the street, ducking behind fences, even sprinting the last block to his building. None of it mattered. When he looked back, she was there. The scarf became unbearable to look at. Every so often it would slip, revealing more of what it concealed. A line of bruised, ravaged flesh. A deep gash running jagged beneath her jawline, too raw to belong to the living. He realized with sick clarity that the scarf wasn't an accessory. It was a shroud. He considered calling the police. But what would he say? "There's a woman with a scarf who walks near me at night." They'd laugh him off. And even if they checked, what would they find? A silent woman on a sidewalk. Nothing illegal. Nothing out of place. By the fourth night, exhaustion and terror had merged into something brittle inside him. He barely ate, barely slept. His co-workers asked if he was sick. He lied, said he had the flu. It was raining when he finally broke. Sheets of water pounded the pavement, bouncing in silver sprays under the lamps. Adam hunched beneath his jacket, shivering as he trudged home. She was there, of course. Always there. The rain plastered her coat to her legs, slicked her hair against her face, but she didn't react. She didn't even seem wet. The water slid off her as though she weren't quite solid. Something inside him snapped. He stopped under a lamp, turned to her, and shouted through the downpour, "What do you want from me?" For the first time, she reacted. Her head lifted slowly, deliberately. Drops of rain traced the sharp edges of her face. Her lips parted, and at last, sound emerged. Not words. A rasp. Broken. Wet. Scraping at the air like rusted hinges. Adam staggered back, while rising in his throat. "Stop it. Leave me alone." The rasping cut off. Silence fell again. Then she stepped forward. The scarf slipped. It slid down just enough to reveal the wound beneath, an open, ragged gash across her throat, the edges dark and torn as though the cut had never healed. The sight made Adam's knees weaken. The rain didn't wash the wound clean. It only deepened the illusion that her skin was unraveling. Her voice came again, fainter now, but with the barest edge of articulation. Walk with me. The words were wet, broken, almost swallowed by the storm. Adam's chest seized. Every instinct screamed to run. But his legs refused to move. Her eyes locked onto his, gray and endless, and for a moment he felt something underneath the terror. Not malice. Loneliness. Her lips trembled. She lifted one hand as if to reach for him, fingers stiff and pale. Please. The sound was pitiful, fractured. Adam bolted. He ran harder than he'd ever run, water splashing up around him, lungs burning, vision blurring. He didn't look back until he'd thrown himself into his building, slammed the door, and collapsed onto the floor in the dim light of the lobby. 4 long minutes he sat there, drenched and shivering, every breath a knife in his ribs. When he finally looked up, his reflection in the glass door made his blood freeze. Behind his own pale face, just faintly visible in the glass, was the shape of a woman in a red scarf, standing inside, only a few steps behind him. That night, Adam barely slept at all. Every creak in his apartment made him flinch, every flicker of shadow felt inhabited. He kept the lights on, but the brightness only deepened the paranoia. For light meant reflections, and reflections meant chances to see her standing where she shouldn't be. At 3 a.m, desperate, he dug out his old laptop and searched for her. Woman in red scarf, throat cut, Grayson Avenue murder. Dozens of results filled the screen, news clippings, forum posts, archive articles. His stomach churned as he clicked the first one. The headline was simple. Local woman found dead in alley, throat slashed. The date was 3 years ago. The photo accompanying it showed a young woman with pale features and a bright red scarf around her neck, smiling at the camera. Her name was Julia Kessler. Adam stared at the photo until the words blurred. The scarf was the same. The eyes were the same. And he realized, with bone-deep certainty, that Julia Kessler had been walking home the night she died. And now, she was walking home with him. What she wants. The morning after Adam discovered her name, the city felt different. Or maybe it was just him. Sunlight poured across Grayson Avenue. Children darted through puddles left from a storm, and the world moved on as if nothing had happened. But Adam carried Julia Kessler's name like a stone lodged in his chest. He couldn't stop staring at her photo on the news site. That smile, the scarf, a face that in life had looked warm, vibrant. Nothing like the silent, broken specter that now haunted his nights. He closed a laptop only to reopen it an hour later, combing through every article he could find. Julia had been 27. She worked at a bookstore downtown. She was last seen leaving a friend's apartment late at night. Her body was discovered in an alley near Larchmont Street, throat cut, scarf soaked dark. No suspect had ever been arrested. The case had gone cold after only a few months. Adam leaned back, staring at the ceiling as nausea twisted through him. He felt like an intruder, stealing fragments of a life that no longer belonged to the living. But what unsettled him most wasn't the brutality of the crime. It was a way her story mapped so perfectly onto his own nightly walk. The bus stop, Grayston, Larchmont, the scarf. He tried to tell himself the resemblance was coincidence, that he'd scared himself into seeing patterns where none existed. But every night, Julia made herself real again. It began as it always did. The bus, the street, the hum of lamps in the dark. And then she was there, falling into step beside him, as though the universe itself had scripted it. But something had changed. Now that he knew who she was, her presence felt different. Less like an intruder, more like a companion who demanded his silence. Her scarf slipped again that night, exposing the torn flesh beneath. But instead of horror, Adam felt something close to pity. He caught himself whispering under his breath, "I know who you are." Her head turned, just slightly, gray eyes flicking toward him. It was the first real acknowledgement she'd ever given him. His heart lurched. "I read about you," he said softly, voice trembling. "Julia Kessler." Her step slowed. The silence stretched taut, the kind of silence that begged to be broken. Then a whisper scraped from her throat. "Home." The word was thin, fragile, like a breath of air forced through water. Adam swallowed. "You want me to take you home?" Her eyes didn't blink, didn't waver. "Home," she rasped again. A chill raced through him, but so did a strange resolve. For the first time, she wasn't just a shadow dogging his heels. She was asking something of him, and as terrifying as that was, it gave him direction. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm. He researched her. Every article, every forum thread, every scrap of information about Julia Kessler's life. He found her old bookstore, now closed. He found photos of her with friends, smiling in bars, posing with stacks of novels. He learned that she'd lived just 3 blocks north of where he lived now, in an apartment above a laundromat. The building was still there, paint peeling, windows shuttered. And every night, she walked with him, silent, unyielding, the scarf around her throat shifting in the wind. The more time he spent with her, the more she bled into his waking life. He caught flashes of her reflection in bus windows, in shopfront glass, even in the black mirror of his turned-off TV. He began to hear her voice at odd times, a faint whisper when he was brushing his teeth, a rasp behind him as he unlocked his door. Always the same word. Home. He barely slept. Food tasted like dust. The world outside narrowed to her and him, walking together beneath the bruised light of Grayston's lamps. His friends noticed. His boss threatened to cut his hours if he didn't get his head straight. None of it mattered. What mattered was her. By the 7th night, he made his decision. It was near midnight when he stepped off the bus and found her waiting. She fell into step beside him as though she had always been there, as though she would always be there. "I know where you lived," Adam whispered, glancing at her pale profile. "I can take you there." Her eyes shifted, not fully toward him, but enough. "Home," she breathed. He nodded, a shiver crawling down his spine. Together they walked, not toward his apartment this time, but north, past shuttered shops and dark windows, past the quiet hum of a city that had already gone to sleep. The streets grew narrower, older, more forgotten. At last, they reached the laundromat. Its sign was faded, letters missing. Above it loomed a brick building, windows black, one of them cracked like a blind eye. "This is it," Adam whispered. He half expected her to vanish, to dissolve into the night now that he'd brought her home. But she didn't. She only stood, staring up at the building, the scarf fluttering faintly in the breeze. "Inside," she rasped. Adam's skin crawled. He hadn't prepared for this. The building was long abandoned. The door hung loose on broken hinges. He hesitated, but the weight of her eyes pressed on him. He pushed inside. The air smelled of mildew and rust. The staircase groaned under his weight. Julia followed without sound, her presence like a shadow made flesh. They reached the 2nd floor. Apartment 2B. The door was closed, dust thick on the knob. Adam turned it slowly. The room beyond was empty, stripped bare. Wallpaper peeled in long curls, the ceiling sagged. But as he stepped inside, a wave of cold washed over him, biting deeper than the night air. Julia entered behind him. She stood in the center of the room, scarf slipping lower, wound yawning open like a second mouth. For the first time, she looked at him fully. Her voice rasped, broken but clearer than before. "Finish the walk." Adam's chest tightened. "What walk?" Her head tilted. The wound gaped. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The last walk." The room darkened, the air bending as though reality itself were thinning. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the floor. The wallpaper rippled. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly, but not theirs, other footsteps, hurried, panicked. Adam's vision swam. He wasn't in the apartment anymore. He was on Grayston. Rain slicked the pavement. A woman was ahead of him, Julia, alive, scarf bright and new. She was walking fast, glancing over her shoulder. Behind her, a man shadow followed. Adam's pulse thundered. He tried to move, tried to shout, but he was frozen. The man caught up, a glint of metal, a blur of motion. Julia screamed toward the night. The knife cut across her throat, the scarf soaking instantly dark. She fell, choking, hands clutching at the wound. Adam staggered back into the present, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. Julia stood before him, eyes empty, scarf loose, wound raw. "You see," she whispered. Adam's voice shook. "You want me to stop him?" Her expression didn't change, but her silence was answer enough. She stepped closer, so close he could smell the iron tang of her wound, feel the cold radiating from her skin. "Finish the walk," she breathed. Adam backed away, but the wall met his shoulders. He was trapped in her gaze, in the gravity of her need. He realized, with a clarity that hollowed him out, she didn't just want him to see. She wanted him to take her place. The following nights blurred into a waking nightmare. Julia appeared not just on his walk home, but everywhere. In his apartment, at the bus stop, in the corner of his vision when he looked down a crowded street. Her presence clung to him like smoke. He couldn't escape. And always, she whispered, "Finish the walk." His dreams replayed her murder over and over. The alley, the knife, the choking gasp. Sometimes he was her, feeling the blade carve into his flesh. Sometimes he was a man, hand gripping the knife, face hidden in shadow. He woke screaming, throat raw, convinced the wound was on his own neck. He stopped going to work, stopped answering calls. Food rotted in his fridge. His life shrank to the rhythm of her footsteps and her whispers. One night, he awoke to find her sitting at the foot of his bed. The scarf had fallen away completely. Her throat was a ragged canyon of torn flesh, glistening in the dark. Her gray eyes fixed on him with a hollow patience. "Finish it," she rasped. Adam broke. "What do you want from me?" he sobbed. "I can't stop it. I can't change it." Her head tilted, lips parting as though the words cost her everything. Then, "Join me." The air froze. The lights flickered. For a moment, the room wasn't his anymore. It was the alley. The rain pounded. The knife flashed. Her blood spread across the pavement like ink. Adam clutched his head, rocking, as her voice filled the air. "Walk with me. Forever." When he looked up, she was gone. But the scarf was on his bedroom floor, stained dark, waiting. The last walk. Adam didn't remember falling asleep, only the sensation of waking into a darkness that wasn't his own. The air smelled of wet stone and rust. His body was heavy, his legs numb. He sat up slowly, heart already pounding. He wasn't in his bedroom. The familiar outlines of furniture, the faint hum of his refrigerator, gone. Instead, he stood at the mouth of Grayston Avenue. Only it wasn't the Grayston he knew. The street stretched unnaturally long, vanishing into a horizon swallowed by mist. The lamps that lined the sidewalk flickered erratically, some sputtering out, others buzzing like angry insects. The air was thick, too thick, as if he were breathing underwater. And beside him stood Julia. Her scarf was gone now, cast off like a pretense. The wound at her throat was stark, jagged, glistening faintly in the weak light. Her eyes were the same gray voids, bottomless and unblinking. Adam's voice came out broken. "No, no, this isn't real." Her head turned toward him, movement slow, deliberate. "Finish the walk," she whispered. The sound of her voice scraped across his skin like broken glass. He backed away, stumbling, but the street shifted with him. No matter which direction he turned, he faced the same endless stretch of Grayston, lamps buzzing overhead, puddles reflecting fractured light. "This isn't my walk," Adam stammered. "It's yours. I can't." Her gaze didn't waver. "You will." The world darkened at the edges, shadows pressing inward. He realized with cold clarity that he didn't have a choice. This wasn't about belief. It wasn't about will. The rules were hers now, and he was caught inside them. So he walked. Each step felt wrong, heavy, like his legs were bound in invisible chains. The silence pressed in, broken only by the faint, wet sound of her breath beside him. She didn't move like a living person. Her feet glided more than stepped, her body swaying ever so slightly, like a marionette tugged by unseen strings. "Where are we going?" he whispered. "Home," she rasped. The lamps above them popped, one by one, each extinguished with a sharp crack. Darkness spread behind them, swallowing the street as they moved forward. Adam quickened his pace, desperate to stay ahead of it, but Julia matched him effortlessly. At last, they turned a corner. The alley. Adam's chest tightened. He recognized it instantly, the narrow stretch between brick walls, the faint graffiti, the overflowing dumpster. The place where Julia had died. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "Not here. I can't." Her hand rose, pale and stiff, pointing down the alley. "Finish!" The shadows deepened. At the far end of the alley, a figure appeared. A man's silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, a glint of metal in his hand. The knife. Adam's legs locked. "No, please. I'm not him. I can't do this." Julia turned to him then, eyes burning with something beyond emptiness, something desperate, endless. "Then be me." The words hit him like ice water. His throat constricted, his vision blurred. Suddenly, he wasn't himself anymore. He was her. He felt the weight of her coat on his shoulders, the brush of the scarf against his neck. His breaths came quick, shallow. Panic bubbled in his chest as a figure at the end of the alley began to move toward him, knife catching the lamplight. "No!" "Adam!" Julia screamed, but the sound gurgled, broken, strangled. His hands flew to his throat instinctively, feeling the soft flesh that would soon be opened. The man lunged. Pain tore through him, hot and immediate. The blade cut deep, and the world tilted. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the cold, wet pavement, choking, the scarf soaking dark, warmth spilling across his chest. The sound of footsteps receded. The man vanished into the dark. Adam gasped for air, clutching his throat. But when he looked down, there was no wound, no blood. He was himself again. Julia stood over him. Her eyes gleamed in the broken light, her wound yawning open. "Now you know," she whispered. Adam's voice cracked. "Why me? Why show me this?" "Because you see me," she rasped. Her face lowered until it was inches from his. Her breath was cold, smelling faintly of iron and decay. "You walked my road. You felt my end. You are mine now." The world rippled around them, the alley stretching into darkness. Adam stumbled to his feet, shaking. "No, I can't be yours. I won't." Her lips curled, not into a smile, but into something sharp, almost mocking. "Forever," she hissed. The lamps above shattered all at once. Darkness consumed everything. Adam woke on the floor of his apartment, heart hammering, throat raw as if he'd been screaming. The scarf lay beside him, damp, heavy, smelling of rain and blood. He scrambled to his feet, kicked it away, but no matter where he shoved it, to the closet, the trash, the alley outside, by morning it was always back. On his bed, on his chair, on his chest. The days bled together. He stopped leaving his apartment, terrified of the streets, terrified of the lamps. But it didn't matter. She was there anyway, standing in his hallway, sitting at his table, reflected in his bathroom mirror, scarf slipping, wound exposed. And always, she whispered, "Walk with me." Sleep became impossible. He drifted between half-dreams and waking nightmares, unable to tell where one ended and the other began. He saw a death replayed endlessly, felt a wound tearing open again and again, until his own throat ached as though cut. By the end of the week, he broke. He couldn't fight anymore. The scarf was waiting for him on his bed, folded neatly, its red darker than ever. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The fabric was damp, sticky, but soft. He wound it around his neck. The moment the knot tightened, the air shifted. His apartment dissolved. He was back on Grayston. The lamps buzzed overhead. The street stretched into mist. And Julia stood beside him, eyes glimmering, wound gaping. She reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Together, they walked. The lamps went dark one by one, swallowing the world behind them. Step by step, they disappeared into the endless night. The next morning, commuters on Grayston Avenue found nothing unusual. The buses arrived on time. The shops opened. Children ran past with backpacks swinging. But later that evening, a red scarf was discovered lying in the gutter near the bus stop. It was damp, frayed at the edges, faintly stained. There was no sign of Adam. And that night, if you walked down Grayston Avenue near midnight, you might notice them, two figures, side by side, pacing each other beneath the flickering lamps. One pale woman with a torn throat, and one young man, silent, his own scarf wound tight, red as blood.